welcome to the 8th episode of Snapverse-616. Probably noticed something a little different this week. Not a dynamic duo. Missing my partner in crime. So give him some good thoughts and well wishes because Jeremy is actually sick, really sick this week. Caught a flu or something like that. And just hasn't been able to get recording time in. So what we're going to do here is a real short episode, nice and quick, to just mostly give you guys the news, the locations, and all that kind of stuff that you need from the podcast every week. That way you're not missing those resources. But as far as more in-depth discussion and things like that, we'll put those segments off until next week. So to start it off, we're going to have our weekly Bugle, with all the news that's fit to print and some of the stuff that would make J. Jonah Jameson even flip his wig. The first thing we have on the news is the card schedule upcoming. So first up is Sauron. Sauron's already in game, you may have noticed. His release date was January 10th. The artist for the card is Eduardo Mello. The colorist, as with most cards in this game, is Ryan Kinnaird. It's a 3/3 card, so it can, work in a surfer deck kind of situation. And its on reveal removes every ability from every ongoing card in your hand and your deck. So this is like one of those first cards that's really kicking it to your whole deck. Really, not just hand, or not just deck. It's not one or the other, either or. This one hits them both. So it has the full effect anytime, anywhere when this card's played, making it, an extremely effective card in terms of time of use and when it's appropriate, and curving out, with this card. And so curving out with this card becomes more a case of how much energy do I have left over per turn if I don't play it on 3, and how does that affect my ability to play other cards that are in the deck synergistically with that. So for instance, if you were to play it on 3, perfect, but if you were to play it on 4, you'd have 1 energy left over. That makes it a little rough in terms of if you're trying to play something else, because maybe Ebony Maw is one of the things that works well with this. Maybe that's what you got, and you can't play it yet because the reveal from Sauron hasn't happened. So it gets a little complicated in terms of if you can't put it down on turn 3. But if you can, perfect. If not, turn 5's real nice, because you still have a 2 left over, which can get you a nice card. Turn 6, if you play that, you don't get the big turn 6 card, but you do have the potential for, say, if you were playing it with a Silver Surfer deck, you could play Sauron on 6 with Silver Surfer and totally just change the plane of the game on turn 6, because they could be thinking something along the lines of, oh, this guy's played Red Skull. Haha, my cards are stronger here. And they could be counting on that in their math, and then when you flip this over on turn 6, they're like, oh, fuck. Because now all those +2s on the lane where Red Skull was played are suddenly gone. And, that can be up to, 8 points. So, I mean, that's a significant amount. You talk 8 points, you're talking, a pretty significant power swing, And in the case of Typhoid Mary, she makes every card on the board on your side -1, right? Kind of like a hazmat with no bennies except for the +10 for a low cost. So if you don't have a Luke Cage, but you do have a Sauron, you could play Sauron, undoes the Typhoid Mary. Suddenly all those -1s, again, someone might not have thought about that in the math. They might not be expecting Sauron yet. Boom. Now you got some cubes going. Also, very effective in general with other cards like we mentioned a second ago, Ebony Maw. Very effective with Maximus if you don't want to give your opponent cards, unless, of course, you're rocking, say, Ronin, and then, Maximus is obviously going to benefit you. So, in like a Ronin Maximus situation, you don't really want a Sauron. But in a non-Ronin situation, this can make Maximus that much more powerful because you could play him, in a late turn after you've played Sauron, and now you're not giving the other guy any cards. Especially in this current state of the game where there's a lot of Dino Draw decks out there. Various versions of them, whether they're lane lock versions or otherwise. There's a lot of those out there right now. It's all the more important to not give up those extra 2 cards, even late game when they can't play them. Those are, the cards you'll see like synergistically played with, the way you can build a deck around. The known weaknesses I'd say for this is Cosmo from the jump. And then the other weakness I'd say is if you're playing an ongoing deck where before you had 0 in there to try to undo some of this Red Skull Typhoid Mary situation, maybe you were playing 0 and Beast so that you could pull 0 back at some point, or Falcon even, and get a redo. Beast would be better because it reduces the energy cost on the next play, but if you're doing something like that and you're trying to play him again, play 0 again and all that, and then play one of these, Sauron can actually kind of get in the way of this in one condition. If you're using Spectrum for your turn, your turn 6 or something like that, where you're going to come in with a card that buffs every ongoing card. Well, if you remove the ongoing abilities, they're technically not ongoing cards anymore, and they don't get buffed. So that's one thing to kind of put in the pocket on that. But lore-wise, Sauron's an interesting character. Dr. Karl Lycos became an energy vampire. Makes you think of What We Do in the Shadows. And the one dude, the nerdy dude, the energy vampire on that. Oh my god. Oh man, he's too much. But in this case, Sauron became an energy vampire when he was fairly young after a mutated pterodon attack. So kind of one of those Savage Lands related characters that you don't really hear about as much in like the MCU or in other Marvel media, Khazar's not the most not powerful, popular character out there necessarily. So a lot of these new cards are actually connected to him in some way. Sauron, and then this next one that's coming up here, Shanna, and she's also related to that lore set because born in Africa, the daughter of a diamond miner. She's also the love interest of Khazar. And one of the interesting things is, in her youth, she witnessed a death at the hands of firearms that she was like, man, this is ridiculous. Why do we even need these? And so she actually quests against firearms. So when you see her picture here and she's got that spear in hand, she very much is against guns. She's more about the martial combat situation, and not just an easy pew pew, so the more personal combat and fighting where you have to know your enemy and not just shoot them from a distance. That's more what she's about, which is pretty interesting, especially considering the Khazar lore and crossover where there's a lot of martial combat in the Khazar world. But as far as how the card works, on reveal, add a random 1-cost card to each location. So she's like Squirrel Girl, but instead of being a cheap 1-cost that's buffable because it's a 1-cost, and also puts out 1-costs that are buffable by Khazar because of 1-cost, right? This also gives you a little bit of RNG to it, where if you were running Squirrel Girl in a Khazar deck as part of a Patriot Kazoo situation, this is not going to add the best synergy there. And the reason for that is she's got an ability, Patriot ain't going to do shit there, right? The 2 cards she pulls in, likely to have abilities, not going to do shit there. Whereas when you clone some squirrels, or clone a 1/1 card off Squirrel Girl with squirrels as opposed to Squirrel Girl, Squirrel Girl doesn't get the Patriot buff, or if you're running Patriot Mistake, the double buff therein. But But she does get the Khazar buff, so she's not entirely a pointless card. Now, with Shanna pulling 2 random 1-cost cards in, you could get like some strong 1-cost cards potentially, right? Because she could add a random like Ebony Maw for a +7 at a point in the game where you couldn't play an Ebony Maw. Granted, that would stop you from playing other cards, so there's a risk there. So, I mean, it's a real gamble when you're using this, but in a 1-cost deck, could be real nice. An alternative idea, though, is instead of in a 1-cost deck where you'd run her alongside Khazar, you could actually run her in a Mr. Negative deck, get her out there early with some other cards that get put out potentially, that maybe have some extra power, because you're in a Mr. Negative deck going to be rocking an Iron Man most likely for a late turn. And if you're rocking an Iron Man for a late turn, those low power cards are actually pretty mid to high power cards depending. So you end up in a much better situation in a Mr. Negative deck running this in some cases than just a Khazar Patriot style deck. So that's one thing to consider. And to go one further, you could run it also in a Quinjet Collector kind of deck, because if you're running Shanna in that deck, she's got the ability to summon like random cards to the board. Now, they're not going to enter the hand, so Collector not necessarily off the jump has the benefit there. But if you're running it in that Quinjet Collector deck, the Quinjet doesn't benefit these 1-cost cards, but in a deck that's that style, you might find synergy with this card potentially. It's not necessarily the best option. It'd be one of those things in that kind of deck where it's like, if you're going to flex a card because you're missing something in a pool and you happen to have this one, it could be an option in there as an alternative to something else. But I think you're going to see her biggest strength, obviously, with Khazar straight up, which if you're going to do that, you're probably going to rock an Onslaught, or like something like that. You can even rock an Odin to pump out more 1-cost cards that get buffed by Khazar. If you were going to do something like that, you maybe rock a Sunspot armor situation. Sunspot gets the buff, plus he soaks up that extra energy, because your board would start filling up from, you know, the repeated use of Shanna. You're talking 1 random card to each location. That's fucking 2, 4, right? You're talking 4 total cards is 1 full location plus her. So, you know, you're leaving yourself 7 cards, playable, and that gets a little dicey. But I would say probably like an Onslaught situation with Khazar would be optimal, because then you could get the extra effect, which makes up for the inability to use Patriot or Patriot Mystique. And since if you're going to do a Patriot Kazoo, you're going to be running Patriot, right? And you're going to try to be running that curve out for Patriot Mystique back to back. So an Onslaught directly replaces that for a turn 6 play and gives you the extra benefit of Khazar's buffs on these cards that might not necessarily be able to be buffed by a Patriot or something like that, because you'd have to have the odds go in your favor to the point of something like drawing Misty Knight, drawing those 1-costs that just don't have abilities, and that's going to be rare. That's going to be rare odds compared to, you're probably more often than not going to draw cards with abilities with her that play out on the board. So Khazar becomes more powerful with Onslaught in this situation. That said, Mr. Negative still added benefit, because she would be able to be played, for 2, right? Because he plays on turn 4, unless you have some sort of energy cards going on with like a Psylocke or, Electro, and then remove the ongoing from Electro kind of thing, so you can play multiple cards. Unless you got something like that going on, you can't play Mr. Negative and Shanna same time because they're competing for space. But if you don't have her drawn and you play her in a Mr. Negative deck, she could be played late for 2 to throw out some extra cards that an Iron Man can buff. And if you're rocking that kind of a deck, you're probably going to want to put Zola in there for your turn 6, so that it can split the Iron Man on a lone location and give you that extra benefit. Next up, we have Dazzler, and she's a pretty interesting card. She's an X-Men lore-related card, right? And so Allison Blair used her mutant abilities first in junior high as like performative art on accident, and then like started doing it more like intentionally to make money and et cetera, et cetera. She's almost kind of like Shazam from DC, like the way, like if you've seen in the DCEU films, if you've seen Shazam, he starts using his superpowers as like a street sideshow kind of thing, like, you know, like at one point singing like hands, psh, lightning from my hands, psh, lightning from my hands, you know, like fucking shooting lightning bolts out and stuff. So it's kind of a lot like that. So I thought that was kind of cute. And it wasn't until like the X-Men, you know, White Queen and like Xavier, and I want to say Kitty Pryde, I might be mistaken on the last one there, took notice of her and were kind of like, you know, you're better than this. You want to do something that matters? You know, standard X-Men stuff. So her ability is ongoing, and if you have 4 cards at each location, so if you filled the board, she's +6 power, making her a +10. That's a lot of work for 10 power, when you could do a lot less work to Typhoid Mary with a Luke Cage chaser. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot of work for a 4 power card to become 10 power. It's a lot of work. But there are decks that it works in where you're not having to do that work, and it's more of a passive buff in that sense. And those are going to be your Ultron Patriot decks, because if she's on board, then you play Ultron. Boom. Now she's a 10, and the bots take care of filling up the board in terms of making sure that you have 4 cards at each location. Now, the problem is you're going to have to play her ahead of Ultron, and playing her turn 5 is not going to be the business unless you're running Zabu. So Zabu would be a friend of hers here, because if you're running Zabu, then you can kind of work that in a little bit better. And if you work that in a little bit better because you're using Zabu, well, now you got some cubes coming your way probably, because you can rock her in late rather than on turn 4 and avoid the Enchantress play potentially, especially if you lane her somewhere they're already filling up and might not be able to afford dropping an Enchantress, or might not think to drop the Enchantress, or might be focused on playing another card there for a tall play, you know, and so if you're running into a situation like that, then, you know, she could be very powerful. But her weaknesses are definitely Enchantress, definitely Shang-Chi, because if she buffs up, or they know she's going to buff up, they can just Shang-Chi and go pop, you know, because that's a 10 now, right? 9 and up. The other weakness would be lane lockers, because if you play her on turn 4 and someone's got Spidey and you're not playing Ultron on turn 6, or say they lock you up on a place and now you don't have a spot to play Ultron on turn 6, this kind of stuff happens. What if they double Spidey you? You know what I mean? What if they Spidey abs man you? You know, there's a lot of options out there right now for double lane locks on turn 5. And if you run into one of those, she's less effective. So I feel like her best use is going to be in an Ultron deck where that turn 6 fills the board guaranteed. But doing that means you're going to play her early and she's more susceptible, right? So she also has value a bit in the 1-cost decks with like the Shanna card that we were just talking about, Squirrel Girl, etc., because you could fill the board, you know. Debris can be helpful in the case of like playing a Patriot or a Patriot Surfer deck or something like that, and you use Debris to throw those extra rocks out there to fill up the board when you didn't get Ultron or something along those lines. But She definitely, even in a deck designed to swarm the board with cards, even in a card swarm meta, she does have, a weakness in that her setup is telegraphed, and unless you're playing her on turn 5 with Zabu, and even then, it's still enough of a telegraph you can counter it or have it countered, though if you do it on turn 5, they may not be able to afford the counter power-wise in total, and may just have to give up that lane. So she could go 2 ways. She could be a telegraph that boom, enchantress, or in a case where an opponent can't do that, she becomes a soft lane lock like Thor, where Thor is a 3/4 that becomes a 10 when Mjolnir is played. This card being a 4 to start, they're like, yeah, but what if she's a 10? And they might just fuck off that lane altogether. And so that gives her a little bit of power as a soft laner in terms of soft lane locking, but she's also susceptible to hard lane lockers against her, and like I said, Shang-Chi. So her best value is going to be in an Ultron deck. Otherwise, the risk-reward gets a little less favorable. Next up, we have the Shadow King. This is an interesting card here. This one is neat because he's not technically from Earth 616, which we have another card coming up that's similar in that. But this one comes out on the 31st of January when the new patch drops with the pool reductions. Dazzler came out on the 24th, which was yesterday, and Shanna came out on the 17th, so, those have been in for a minute. But Shadow King comes out when the pool reduction patch drops, so this one, I feel like you're going to have the least chance to get if you're aiming for it, because when the pool reductions hit, there's going to be so many cards that are in 4 and 5, and you're going to have less access at that point than you do now, in the sense of having finished pool 3, you're getting extra collector's tokens and this and that if you're not saving your boxes like you should anyway. You should be saving your boxes until January 31st, though, because when they open, that's when they generate the content, not when you earn them. So at time of opening is when the pool RNG happens. So save those until the 31st, and when the pool drops happen, the pool reductions, then you can get some better chances on those pool 4 and 5 cards that are coming down that we talked about in the previous episode, down to pool 3 or even pool 4. So for me, I have Luke Cage pinned in the shop. I have enough tokens to buy him when it hits, and then I have a bunch of collector caches, so I'm going to buy him and then start opening those caches. That way I get him, and the other caches I can get some other pool 3 cards that I don't have, or something along those lines. Anyway, that said, the art for this is by Joe Vereen, and Ryan Kinnaird colored it. Ryan Benjamin was the artist for Dazzler, and Ryan Kinnaird colored that. And Ryan Kinnaird was the artist and colorist for Shanna the She-Devil. But back to Shadow King here. This is a 4/3 card that on reveal sets all cards at that location to their original base power. So this is going to be a really nice counter to the card swarm meta right now, that relies a lot on Patriots, Blue Marvels, etc., etc., or even the Mr. Negative, Iron Man decks we were talking about. This is going to be a nice counter to those, because when you play that, boom, everything goes back. This one would be great in a deck with Valkyrie, for instance, because you could play this on turn 4, play her on turn 5, and basically just nuke the buffs. If you're playing Zabu, you could Valkyrie turn 5, play this guy turn 6, and just like nuke 2 lanes that the opponent thought they had something going in, you know, and really just level their power. So whether they're going wide or tall, doesn't matter. You obliterate everything, knock it back the way it was. Now, that said, I believe the best counter to this card is going to be Luke Cage. Other than just Cosmo protecting him from being played in a specific lane, I think Luke Cage, because that means he cannot affect your cards. So, I think Luke Cage is definitely going to have a lot of added benefit in decks just as a resource. I think, you know, as a 1-cost card, you could throw him in a lot of decks just to protect yourself, like throwing armor in a deck to protect yourself, kind of. So Luke Cage is definitely going to have a lot of added value, and one of the reasons is this guy right here. I think you could play him well in a Mr. Negative deck, because then, you know, so say you don't have Zabu, but you did get down on that Silver Surfer season pass, so you got Silver Surfer. If you play Mr. Negative, now you can use your Silver Surfer to buff this guy. He becomes a 7 instead of a 4, right? Because Silver Surfer does +3 to 3-cost cards, I believe. So, you know, that's a real nice situation that you could have if you play him with Mr. Negative. But, you know, it's not as good as if you could play it with Zabu in terms of the power reduction. But it just means you can slot him in on a Mr. Negative deck and give yourself a little something. That way, say they buff up a bunch of stuff, you could come in and drop him and then do an Iron Man Zola split. But because you reduce his cost, you can play a few more cards, stuff like that. So you got some options with Shadow King. But the interesting part about him is he's like a multiversal entity, sort of like Kang or the Infinite. The Infinite, remember, comes from like a macroverse, so like he's so huge when he gets here. But the Shadow King, he actually spawned with the very first nightmare a human had, and basically exists because of human like pain and suffering and stuff like that, and like negative emotion. So he's kind of interesting. I like the card. I like the card art. Kind of has like Kingpin vibes, like Shadow King, Kingpin. So I kind of dig it. The next card up that we have here, this is MODOK. And MODOK, voiced by Pat Oswalt in the TV series. It's pretty funny. On reveal, discard your hand. You're thinking, on what fucking planet do I want to do this, man? What the fuck? I need my hand. How can I play cards if I don't have a hand? Yeah, well, this once lowly AIM technician, you know, advanced idea mechanics technician, George Tarleton, he rose to overtake them, actually, after some cosmic cube experiments mutated him, that he had volunteered for because he was such a loyal, member of AIM. And so as a result, he decided, you know what, fuck y'all, I own this place now, I'm taking over. And then he ends up running AIM, because his ego and his brain grew so much. And that's also why he has to be in the special like prosthesis and chair and all, is because without that, he would crush his own body under the weight of his now humongous brain. But that gives him some like telepathy and other powers. It's pretty cool. He's definitely an interesting character. I'd say his weakness is obviously Cosmo, because Cosmo can prevent him from being played. I'd say his other weakness is his own associates, and we'll get to that. Because his known associates are things like Hela, APOC, Dracula, Morbius, even Invisible Woman. Typical disco deck stuff. And the reason for that is because he's going to discard stuff. The other thing, though, is one of his known weaknesses, being his own associates, is that they can discard him before he has a chance to discard them. You know, so a little game of discard chicken going on in your hand when you have MODOK. But I'd say the benefit outweighs the risk. And if you're that worried about it, you could Invisible Woman your MODOK. And if you were to Invisible Woman your MODOK, that protects from him revealing and discarding Hela and things like that before you have a chance to play him. Because Hela, you're going to want to play. She's a 6 cost. You're going to want to play her on turn 6. There's no way to Mr. Negative her or anything like that. She's a 6/6. So if you're playing Hela, you're going to have to lead into her with MODOK, right? And if you're doing that, you're going to discard Hela. That's not really what you're trying to do. So if you're running Hela, you're going to probably need an Invisible Woman situation to make this work. Alternatively, the real use here would be in like in terms of the best use you can make of it would be with Morbius, Dracula, and APOC. And the reason for this is APOC's going to get like big when MODOK discards him. He's already going to get big if you've discarded him prior with things like Sif and stuff like that. But if you manage to discard a bunch of shit and then APOC's all strong, if you manage to play a bunch of shit that discards APOC, right? Because like if you play Lady Sif, Lady Sif's great in this combo because she's not going to kill MODOK if you have APOC in hand. Why? Because APOC's your highest cost card. So Lady Sif becomes like a really, really good attractive piece here. So I would say a 4-piece becomes a 5-piece, half a deck build from the jump if you just go Morbius, Dracula, Apocalypse, MODOK, and then throw in that last card there. So if you were to do that, you would have an APOC that's buffing himself and is playable at no point in time. But if you've played Dracula, he's gonna, as soon as you've played MODOK, have to assume the strength of Apocalypse. There's going to be no other card in your hand. So if you were to play MODOK last, Dracula becomes whatever APOC is. That's really strong. And then Morbius keeps buffing, right? And then when you throw MODOK down, he just goes and buffs Morbius a bunch more. So it's like the Zabu Jet deck that we've talked about in prior episodes, where you use like Collector, Sentinel, things like that to buff Collector by like having cards enter your hand that you didn't get from your deck. Instead of like having extra cards, in this case, the more you're discarding buffs with Morbius. So Morbius becomes a very strong card. Dracula becomes your big card, and then MODOK with an 8. That's already pretty strong. Sif, you're going to get a 4 out of her. Play a couple other cards around that for a little bit of power here and there, and you got a really, really nice deck going. And so like I said, I think that makes APOC, Dracula, Morbius, MODOK, and Sif a 5-piece combo that you can build a deck around and really get something done. And if you have Invisible Woman, consider that 6 pieces. That's half a deck. I mean, that's a real strong situation. But again, his own associates can be a problem because typical disco cards could accidentally discard him, or he can accidentally discard Hela, etc., etc. So you have to really be careful what kind of disco deck you're going to run with it. Hela becomes a big gamble and a lot less likely to happen unless you're rocking Jubilee turn 4, which takes away your Dracula, unless you're doing a Zabu situation. So if you're doing Zabu, you throw that in there. And then you could play Jubilee and Dracula turn 4. Allow Jubilee to maybe pull that Hela out to get a bunch of cards that you've discarded leading in. But the thing is, you're not going to have discarded all that many cards from turn 1 through 4, unless you like got Blade and all these things to curve out perfectly, and even then, you're going to need the things in your hand to have gotten destroyed just right and not lose MODOK. So I think the real strength is a curve where you play Morbius, Dracula, or Morbius, Sif, Dracula, MODOK, and then, boom. You got this big Dracula. You got a MODOK for 8. You got a big Morbius. And you got a couple other cards you could throw around. So I think that's the real strength of MODOK is right there. But I'm excited to try that card out because I like Disco decks and Destro decks. So this could be fun. I hope I get him. Actually, I think my mistake. I will get him because he's the Quantumania season pass. So he'll be coming out February 6th with the new season. So you're probably going to see a lot of these kinds of decks in there. And if you want to get out ahead of that, this is the deck build to do. I would consider definitely picking this up. The season pass with MODOK is 100% going to be worth it just for his card alone. It was worth it with Zabu too, and it was worth it with Silver Surfer, but MODOK's definitely going to be worth it if you have APOC, Dracula, Morbius, and Sif. Yeah, that's going to be the business. That's going to be the sauce. That's going to be the juice. That's what you're going to want to run. And everybody's going to be rocking this on season reset night. So you're going to want to have a counter ready for that if possible. So you're going to be wanting to rock a Cosmos somewhere. You're going to want to be rocking a leader maybe, or I don't even know. We'll get to the counters on MODOK next episode though. But for now, we'll bring up our last card, and that's Kang the Conqueror. On reveal, he looks at what the opponent did, then restarts the turn, but this time without Kang. So the fact that he has 0 power doesn't really matter. But 5 cost, you could Daredevil and see what your opponent's doing on turn 5. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a real expensive way to do the turn, And we also have to kind of see like how it actually plays out. And the reason I say that is because Ben Brode is notorious for the cards being kind of ambiguously worded or kind of looking like they could be one thing versus something else. So looking at what your opponent did, then restart the turn sounds a lot like you get Daredevil, but you get to move your cards around after, So you get to see what they play, and then you get to take your turn over. But their turn stays the same. That's what it sounds a lot like, and I'm going to be honest with you. For 5 energy, that's doo-doo balls. That's doo-doo balls for 5 energy. So you play Mr. Negative deck, you put this guy in it, and now he's a 0 costy. He's got 5 power. That's not going to matter because he's going to pull himself out of the game once you use him. But at 0 cost, okay, now he's worth it because Daredevil costs 2. You got to play him in a curve on turn 2, etc., etc. And that means, well, I could have played a different card on turn 2 or something, I could have played Cable and stolen something from them. I could have played Scorpion and nuked their power base. I could have played Okoye and buffed my deck, There's so many things you could do on turn 2 with a good card on turn 2 that playing Daredevil is definitely a cost if you're not going synergistic with him in terms of like Gamora, Professor X. So if you have Mr. Negative and you're playing Kang, well, now you can play for 0, and whichever turn it is you decide. So instead of just turn 5, you could be like, I'm going to play him turn 6, or, and you could decide a way more important turn that way. If you have your Mr. Negative get yanked out by Sakaar or something, you could play this guy so early, that like you can see something critical on like a turn 4 or something, But obviously, his highest value is going to come from like turn 5, 6, the standard turn 5 fare with like Gamora, Professor X, Spider-Man, those kinds of things, allowing you to know what lane to lock best, and et cetera, et cetera. Adam Warlock can also be beneficial in terms of Kang, because more cards drawn by having a victory at a spot, right? So again, if you were able to play Kang early enough, or just play him advantageous enough, in a situation where you need to draw cards, like say you got a Devil Dino or something like that, you could have an Adam Warlock ready to go, having Mr. Negative Kang, and get yourself extra 2 cards. Or you could have Adam Warlock having been played somewhere, figure out what it takes to get the lead there once you play Kang, and get those extra cards. So Kang has a lot of benefits for like lane lock type situations in decks. Best advantage played with Mr. Negative. That way he's free, and you can play like, because I get that you play the turn without Kang again. So the fact that he costs 5 doesn't really matter, because you didn't actually have to play your cards. You just play Kang and then you do it over. But again, we don't know what the wording and all that, how that's going to shake out. So until we know for sure, Mr. Negative looks like a viable option. But we may find out that the functionality of this thing means that Mr. Negative is just being extra, and you don't need to do all that nonsense. But as far as the lore for Kang the Conqueror, we have on reveal. For the lore, we have born Nathaniel Richards, and you're thinking, Richards, that sounds familiar. That's because he is in fact a descendant of Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, on Earth 6311. And he is now an infinite dimensional being, a la Rick from Rick and Morty. Literally, Kang the Conqueror came back, talked to himself, just like Rick did with the portal gun kind of thing, told himself some stuff. And so he tried not to be himself, became a hero for a while. That didn't work out. Ended up fulfilling his own self-fulfilling prophecy in the end anyway. Is like an infinite being in terms of he's in every universe. There's a universe of him. He could have the Citadel of Ricks, and in Loki, right, in MCU, he has something along those lines with the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, who he is in charge of. Sorry, spoiler alert. But if you haven't seen it by now, that's kind of on you. It's going 3 years now, dog. So now, there is speculation in terms of the Miss Marvel card. There was an article released recently that talked about this card's upcoming, and we don't know if that's because something got leaked, someone heard something, or what, or if a reporter just was assigned Snap, doesn't know the depth of the game and everything, and just seen, oh, look, this card's not out yet, and it's going to come out at some point. It's in the unreleased pile. Ooh, look at this one. This is cool, and no one's talked about it yet. I'll talk about it, but doesn't understand that the reason it hasn't been talked about yet is because it's probably not going to come out until the Marvels film comes out, in my personal opinion. And that's because this card we're speculating about is the Miss Marvel card. We don't know when the release date will be, but its ability is ongoing. If this is your only card here, adjacent locations have +5 power. So it's like a stronger Mr. Fantastic, but with a little bit more restrictions. Or, it's like an Omega Red that's easier to pull off, guaranteed. But being that it's a 3-cost 4 power, you're probably going to end up playing it early-ish. Or you're going to split push it on turn 6. So the thing, or if Sarah, you really split push it turn 6, right, because you reduce it to a 2-cost. But the thing is, it's telegraphed. It's really telegraphed, and all you have to do is hit it with an Enchantress. Boom. Now there's no point, and you had to sacrifice a lane to get to that point, which means when they play Enchantress on turn 4 to counter your Miss Marvel, you're already playing in other lanes or doing something else based on the fact that you think you have that lane, played the way it needs to be played, and you're fine because you've given that lane up, and then, oh, surprise, surprise, they're taking the lanes you need, and they just Enchantress because they've got Zabu, you know, so they could play a cheap Enchantress. Oh, they just hit your fucking, you know, your buff lane, and oops. Now what are you gonna do? So it's gonna be interesting. I would imagine, to be perfectly frank, that we will see a rework in the powers before launch, much like when the inaugural episode of Snapverse-616 happened. We put on, you know, a bunch of these dossiers about cards that were coming out, and things like Silver Surfer and She-Hulk were changed. Boom! The second the patch launched and stuff like that. But information was a little more sparse in those days. A lot more people are in on this game now. A lot more information's available. A lot of stuff's happening. So I figure we're gonna see a change to that card, just like we did with those other ones. So I don't imagine Miss Marvel will actually look like that on release, but I do expect that she will be released in a similar fashion to Kang and MODOK, in terms of with a film association to it. So the launch will, you know, probably happen when we see, you know, the Marvels movie with Captain Marvel, the Rambo duo, mom and daughter, you know, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, and et cetera, et cetera. So looking forward to that for sure. Now, we did talk a little bit ago about the battle mode, or I'm sorry, the patch on January 31st that's coming out. One of the things that's coming out with that is the battle mode. Battle mode, what's that, Smokey? That's that intentional matching we've been talking about. So now we can have tournaments and stuff like that. We will be announcing a Snapverse-616 tournament at some point in the near future to coincide with this patch. We're going to get the homies together on that. Rascal, King Mike, etc. And Mal and Ocean and whatnot. And Mamba Shane. I'm trying to remember everyone and not leave anyone out here, but and Nico Wabbit. So we're gonna definitely have some kind of tournament happen. We're gonna get the homies going on it, you know, hype ourselves up with it, but also get you guys involved. And if you want to be a part of that, definitely let us know. We'll have more information on that in the coming episodes, probably in episode 9. If not, definitely in episode 10. But I would think in episode 9, because the patch is going to come out next week. So in the episode after this one, look for information about the Snapverse-616 community tournament that we will be putting on. And that should be a lot of fun. But back to the battle mode itself, that's coming out with the January 31st patch, along with the pool reductions and etc. The specifics of it are each player will have a unique code to match up against each other. So it seems to be built using the same sort of framework as the deck copy pasta, you know, for the deck lists and sharing deck lists. So you'll have a code to match against each other, and that's how, like, you know, you control that. And then each player starts with 10 health. They experimented around with this quite a bit to land on this number. So each player starts with 10 health, and each player loses health equal to the value of the cube. So, like, you know, when you're playing in ranked and whatnot now, you know, you get like 1 cube if they retreat. You get 2 cubes if you win and no one snapped. You know, you get 2 cubes if someone snapped and then there's a retreat, etc. Like 4 cubes, 8 cubes, etc. So instead of the cubes being cubes for like ranked mode, what they're gonna be is health. So matches will be similar, and when you lose your 10 health, that's it. So if you lose an 8, the next one you're done if you don't win it, right? So that makes it kind of like tournament play in poker, which we will talk about in the upcoming episode. And then players will lock in a deck and use the same deck throughout the matches. So you can't, like, you can't pick a deck get outclassed by it or something, or decide, oh man, I know how to counter theirs, and then swap decks. Nope, you pick a deck to start, and win lose, that's the deck you picked. That's the deck you married going into the tournament. You know, till death do you part. But there's also no ties, so there's only a winner and a loser. Period. Right. So it won't end until somebody has won, because obviously it's going to be multiple hands played, not just one hand played. Now it's a friendly battle, right? So this is the first unranked mode that we're getting. So it's going to be a lot of fun to play when you're trying to learn decks and stuff like that, because you could try out a deck and have people like try to come and counter you with it, have friends try to beat you with their different decks and stuff, and see what it's susceptible to, or when it's curving out, not curving out against those kind of decks. And because friends are friends and like to play games with friends, you know, you guys can help each other, playing each other, while learning, you know, new decks and new deck play, because a friend's not going to be like, haha, now I'm holding this secret for how to beat them. They're going to be like, okay, so this card, when you played it here and this and that, so I would adjust this or that and the other, you know, and I think that's going to be really helpful for community deck building and stuff like that. There will also be a tournament format. We talked a little bit about that in terms of we're going to be holding one. And players can use that for organizing events and so on. And so that's going to be really cool, because Snapverse-616, we're going to put on a tournament. And we have yet to determine the prize and all that, but we're thinking about something like in-game gold or something along those lines. You know, or like a Steam gift, a gifty on Steam to the Steam wallet kind of situation, so that you can get the in-game item that you want. That said, the first release of the battle mode will be region locked, and we don't know what the regions are to know what that means, except in the Neon event challenge that's going on right now. That one, in the community challenge, there's a leaderboard that has different regions on it, so we can assume that those are the regions that we will be locked into. That may limit which friends you can play with as a streamer, so this could affect some stuff, but it seems like it's continental, like most things, so you should be able to play most of your friends, and then in future iterations, hopefully, you know, sooner than later, they'll have it ironed out enough that they don't have to region lock it, and that'll be great for like tournament play and stuff like that, and playing with friends, because that's the whole point of this, right? And then one of the things that they also addressed was they noticed that a lot of times a game can take forever. They want this to take about 20 minutes per set of hands, you know, so one matchup should take about 20 minutes. And so they found that if people were like, you know, really stingy about it, which happens in tournament play, in tournament style play with elimination stuff, that there was less snapping and there was a lot more lose one, win one, lose one, win one grinding. So to counter that issue, to take care of that, to, you know, make it so that these games don't go on to infinite, and then you can never get to your infinite rank because you can never play again because you're in this game forever, and it's lasting longer than you know, 2 months ago before the patch to fix location timings, when someone played like an Odin on top of a Zola on top of an Odin on top of Zola, Odin, Zola, Odin, Zola, Odin, and then 10 minutes later the game ends. You know, so to counter that kind of stuff, after round 5, the higher stake rounds will start kicking in. Higher stake rounds, so that's kind of, again, that's like tournament play in poker, where like the blinds increase over time throughout a tournament, to keep people from trying to, you know, eke it out and stay in without actually like playing, etc. You know, just to eke it out kind of thing. And so similarly, after round 5 in this, higher stake rounds begin, and that doubles the amount of cubes wagered. So once you get to that point, even if you're exchanging 2 and 2 and 2, it's going to end a lot quicker because there's only 10. If someone can, you know, get 2 3 times in a row, that's really going to knock the other guy down. And by that point, you may have taken one a couple times in the first few rounds that now that guy's maybe got like one hand left, and boom, you got it. So they've definitely taken care of the format. It's really nice, and it definitely fits into that superhero system poker stuff we're always talking about. But we'll talk about that one in the next episode coming up later this week. And then the other consideration is you can only bet with cubes with the amount of health you have. So, if you've only got 8 health, you can only bet up to 8 cubes. If you've only got 2 health, you can only bet up to 2 cubes, et cetera, et cetera. So, new battle mode coming. Looks real interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Sweet. And then in terms of the event right now, there's the Neon Challenge. There's also a Jubilee package in the store. The Jubilee package, you get 500 credits and 500 gold for $5. Plus, you get a dope Jubilee skin, a dope Jubilee avatar, and a bunch of Jubilee boosters. So I think that's worth it. I got it myself, and I was able to use that gold toward like a variant that I want. Since I'm at pool 3, I don't really need to spend gold in any other form or fashion, like to get like additional collector level or anything like that, because the gains toward pool 4 and 5 cards are so slow once every 40 boxes that I just don't care anymore in terms of that kind of stuff. But it was a really dope Jubilee variant. I didn't have one yet, so that was pretty sweet. That's in the store. I recommend getting it because you'd pay $5 for, a similar amount of gold anyway, with no credits, no variants, etc., etc. So this is a good deal. This is a really good deal, good value for your dollar. And if you use Jubilee a lot, even better. It's a beautiful skin, beautiful variant. I rock it now. Other things in terms of like the lunar events, the Neon Challenge is still ongoing. We hit the second mark. We've knocked his health down a significant amount. So check your inboxes. There's another 200 gold available for you. And then the challenge also involves a leaderboard. So the more you contribute, you could potentially be in the top 10 of the leaderboard. If you're in the top 10, you get a special reward, a special title that only the top 10 in every region get. And then the challenge also has, like the winter challenge has a loot component beyond just the beating it and doing the event loot component. There is a calendar event component going on right now as well, so definitely check your inboxes. You get a cool Swordmaster variant that kind of matches the Jubilee variant in terms of like the art type for the Lunar Festival. It's really cool. You get that, you get some gold, you get some other things, so keep checking your inbox daily for the rewards off of that event. But that is all the news that's fit to print, and even some of the stuff that would make J. Jonah Jameson jump out of a third story window. So we will move on, and up next we have locations. This week, Invoke's locations will be brought to you by Smokey. Locations this week, we have some pretty interesting stuff. So the first one is Savage Land. That's pretty standard. We've seen it before. It's not new. It gives you 2 1 cost 1 power raptors to each side. It works good with Kazoo Patriot type decks. It also works good in Destro decks, gives Carnage some free nom-noms, It also means that it's a great cost reduction opportunity for death as a result, too. You can Killmonger them. If you Killmonger them and the other player hasn't eaten them yet, now you're getting rid of 4. That's a boom, boom, quick way to just get death out there with 1 card played, aside from her. Because destroying 4 of those brings her down to 5 cost. You play Wave, that makes her a 4 cost, right? Makes her cost 0. So, definitely good for Destro decks and Death and etc. etc. That said, Doc Ock has increased power value in that lane as a result, because he can only pull 2 cards in. Now that does mean he has less opportunity to disrupt their late turn plays by pulling in the wrong cards to the wrong place at the wrong time and in the wrong order, stuff like that. But his 10 power plays a little harder there when you can only pull 2 cards down. So Doc Ock has a little bit more breathing room on Savage Land, and that said, he also becomes more effective off of Savage Land, because if you fill up another location by going fwat and dragging 3 or 4 cards, well, Savage Land's half full already. They only have really 1 lane left. You can like coax out some retreats doing that. Get easy 1 cube gains. Especially at the higher levels where people tend to retreat more in bad situations and chase odds or chase bad odds a lot less. So it's a cool spot. It's got some opportunities. It's pretty standard in terms of play type. You can buff with Patriot as well, like we said, Patriot Kazoo. But the next location is Rickety Bridge. This one was fun as fuck. So this one basically has the effect of Atuma, but for a location, right? So the way Atuma works, right, if he's at a location unarmored with another card at the end of a turn, he destroys himself. Rickety Bridge, if there's more than 1 card there, destroy them. But that goes for both sides. So if there's 1 card from each player, they go bye-bye. This is where I played Decacidal, a deck we featured a few episodes back for me, for my featured deck of the week. That deck has both Magneto and Doc Ock. Doc Ock, great here because you could pull 4 of their important cards out on turn 5, ruin their turn 6 because they all get destroyed. So he has even greater value than normal for disruption, because instead of hoping that the cards get pulled in out of order and all this stuff in a way that becomes beneficial to you so that you can win the other 2 lanes or even win that lane straight up, Rickety Bridge allows you to just fucking nuke 4 of the fucking cards in hand. And when you're playing Doc Ock on turn 5, they need those cards in hand. So that's going to lead to a lot of retreats. If you don't get Doc Ock for turn 5, or even if you do, you can do this combo as well. So Magneto. Magneto has value like Arrow in terms of controlling the way lanes play out. So if you play Magneto off lane on turn 6, you can make the other lanes stronger by pulling their 3 and 4 cost cards away and reducing their power level. But with Rickety Bridge, what makes Magneto awesome here is the fact that he can literally just show up, pull cards there, and destroy them. So, yes, he dies too, but those cards no longer have their effects if they were ongoing buffers. Because remember, some strong 3 and 4 costs that like buff and stuff are like Khazar, Patriot. So you start playing those ones out, onto Rickety Bridge with Magneto, you destroy their ongoing buffs. So that deck was super strong. I climbed quite a few cubes the days that Rickety Bridge was out playing those. So big recommend for that. Even though the event's over, it's something to remember for when you see Rickety Bridge in the future if you're playing those cards in a deck, because those are some amazing plays. Then obviously the same standard fare applies for location control. You can play Quake to move the Rickety Bridge. So if you play her early enough, you can swap the lanes and disrupt the opposing power curve or eliminate key early cards like Angela or Ant-Man. But played late, you could actually swap it to one of the outside lanes and nuke all the opposing cards. Because she's a low-cost card, you have the option to do either of those. And so that makes her fairly powerful, if not a little RNG. So I think you have better strength with Ock and Magneto, but if you don't have those and you have Quake, you can accomplish something similar with her on Rickety Bridge. Then obviously Rhino, Storm, Scarlet Witch, the standard fare for changing the location straight up, or nuking it, or flooding it so that it no longer has that effect. So, obviously those still play. Alright, so that'll take care of Snapverse-616 for this week. Sorry I was a little short. Jeremy got sick, so without my duo, we just wanted to make sure that you had the updates on news and locations enough so that you know what's going down, what's coming out, what events are happening, what you need to be aware of, what you need to look out for. So that said, we will be back later this week with the full episode where we will talk about some super squads. We will talk about some countercultures. We will talk about superhero system and the poker element of tournament play versus ranked play at Wild, we will also explore further some smoke strats, and we will talk about the new location that is out this week for events, and all that and more. So definitely tune in for that episode coming out later this week or over the weekend, and think some good thoughts for Jeremy so that his recovery goes swiftly from the flu, and we will see y'all on the flippy flop. So excelsior, true snappers, and see y'all next week.
Where each deck fitted, even though I'm prone to snap that. Known to be so quick-witted, you sound Odrax when you snap back. When everyone knows it rains Jess Jones on the tap mat. Think your boss sings the flow, administer vision if you're not at a spot I blow with a skip track. You tried to blow back the roof, so my armor said I will skip that. Jubilee still got a +1, Okoye said she's with that. Cause the Nightman cometh, Iceman stunneth, while the Hulkman smashing America ass who done it? Snapverse-616. 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 Then Invoke drops Kazar cause he's Mr. Fantastic. His spectrum of skills are what let me handle this rap shit. His puff up, his clutch up, smokes 3 sacks like it's magic. But it's a Wolfsbane classic. You thought your full moon's Jurassic, but it's actually tragic. If I'm a silver fox with the flippity yippity yapping, he's quick like a rabbit. His girls unfurling squirrels while his flirkins hurling antics. Invoke the hawk-eyed watcher who ought to see through your static.